Welcome, guys, to another weekly webinar. First and foremost, apologies about the rescheduling from yesterday into today. Unfortunately, I had some time constraints on my hands, and I wasn't able to make it back in time to do the webinar. And so here we are today. And so really excited, actually, and I'm glad that we're doing it today rather than yesterday, because now we have a bit of a clearer sight on what's going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours, or maybe until the end of the week at least, and definitely potentially for the next coming weeks. And so a lot of critical things are going on as of right now, right? One of the things that we were stating for quite some time was that this entire movement had to be treated from a correctional perspective, and it really shouldn't be warranted as that bullish momentum yet, because we did state that dollar will come and tag the 94.15 handle, right? And that's something that we were stating. And so one thing that is really exciting that we're going to go over today in the webinar is, okay, where are we going to move now? Because for the last 3 weeks, we were stating, okay, we're treating dollar and we're treating that entire movement as a short-term movement, and to be very careful about it, because at some point we are expecting some type of pullback or reversal. And so if that's really the case, now here we are, and it's like, all right, so what's the next step? Because that was the first movement, right? And so now where are we headed to go? And so that's why I'm really excited to get into this webinar. If you guys don't know how my weekly webinars work, basically what I do is I go through the $6 pairs that you have here, 7 including the dollar index itself. Reason being is I'm a sole dollar index pair trader, simply for the fact that those are pairs that I feel most comfortable with, as well as the pairs that I just tend to cling on to as the years have went on. And so after that, I do take any questions or answers that you guys may have. And so if you guys do have any, please, you could either put them in the chat room, and I will get to them at the end, or if not, then you can simply just write them down and wait. You could speak on them either way, however you want to go about it. But with that, we're going to get right into the dollar index pair. What I'll do is I'll break down every single pair from top down, from a long-term perspective and short-term, and then from there I will give one quick overview on where we should see structure looking to move within the next 24 to 72 hours. And so let's get right into it, guys. So we're going to start off with the monthly time frame, just to kind of see what's going on from this area and kind of see, okay, where could we potentially expect you moving? And so here we are as of right now. We're in that, quite critical of an area that acted as a very, very strong base of support back in the day from about mid of 2014 all the way into 2018. And just recently, right, we decided to break those lows in the start of 2018. Now, one thing we were stating was that this was the initial impulse. And so if we did in fact break these lows, which we did in 2018, then therefore we're going to state that this now becomes invalid, or is not necessarily the momentum that we're looking to ride off of, and therefore this is not treated as a relief stage anymore, and rather we're now looking at as this is the impulse that we're looking to trade. Now, a lot of people were stating, why did this happen? This is something that we've been reviewing for the past couple of weeks, right? And we were stating it had nothing to do with the fact that this ascending trend was here, but rather it had to do with the fact that this needed some type of liquidation or pullback or relief, profit taking, whatever you want to call it at the end of the day, after this entire movement down, right? We in fact broke this area, and so now what we're simply doing, my students all know this, we're simply structurally retesting the previous area that was broken, right? And so with that being said, if we do start to pull off and we do start to reject, then you're definitely still looking to sell this back to the downside. And your goal is really to start getting back to that monthly support around the 84.46 handle. Reason being, guys, because this entire bullish momentum, it's not completely invalid, but for the short term, it is, simply for the fact that we were stating that this whole movement here was to be treated as, relief, right? Or liquidation, whatever you want to call it. But now, once we start to target here, then we can start to say, okay, that could potentially start to come into play, and this is just treated as a bigger term correction for now potential rally back to the upside, which could potentially happen, right? But just speaking about it from, the next coming months, potentially even to next coming years, right? We are expecting to tag that 84, 85 handle. And once we do, then it's going to be a game of, okay, who's going to take control now, right? Are we still going to continue down, or we start to get to here and we'll start to decelerate over time? And so looking at it from a weekly stance, guys, and getting right into it, that's monthly, right? Okay, so we can see here now that we are definitely rejecting that 94.15 handle, right? And one thing to take into consideration is that this is not something that you want to be playing with, right? Like I said, guys, is that when we were sitting here in the past 2 weeks, I was like, look, it is a high risk exposed trade, but you still do have shots straight up to that 94.15 handle. Now that we're here, it's like, okay, now things start to change, because that there's a tremendous amount of pending orders sitting there, right? And we know that simply for the fact that you can see how hard the buyers fought back in the day to make sure that area didn't get broken. And when we finally did break, you know that now sellers are going to be attempting to gain control of that area, right? That's just basic foundation of price action. And so looking at it as of right now, we can definitely see that structure is decelerating off of that 94.15 handle. No indication yet that we are going to move into a bear market. It's just telling us that, look, okay, we're going to have some trouble here now, right? And so this is where things become a little bit more complex and become a little bit dicier, simply for the fact that you could see a lot of whipsaw and a lot of false breaks, right? Now, that initial false break that will get at the tops, that'll be a nice, quick, play to the downside. But once you get back to that base around there, then from there, it's going to be a game of who's going to take control at that point. And so looking at it right now, I just want you guys to take your attention here to the left here real quick. I want you guys to see how that initial momentum will occur, right? So when we, in fact, did break that low, right, looking at the left here, notice how strong of a push it did make, right? And then we did get a pullback, relief, whatever, for another continuation down, right? And so what we need initially is somewhat of a very strong impulse. And if we can, in fact, get that, then you know what? We are golden, and we should start looking for that continuation to the downside. So right now, guys, it's telling us is, look, guys, be aware that potential sellers markets can come into play. But until you see, a pretty big impulse to the downside, you guys can't come and state that we're going to be looking for a bearish market, right? Because from there, we're going to look for some type of pullback, and we can look to sell it down back to the 90.50 handle, right? And then from there, it's a game again of, is that correctional relief for continuation back to the upside, and that'll be interesting to see. So let's go to the daily time frame. Huge rejection and false break that we're seeing right now across the board. You guys can see here to the left, right, that this was definitely regarded as a pretty strong area. We know there's going to be pending orders sitting there after we broke that previous low, and so it makes complete sense why we are starting to pull off. Now, if you are part of my training course and you guys understand how continuation patterns work versus reversal patterns, right, you guys know that that was the initial impulse. That was your small term relief, and then from there we formed a beautiful reversal pattern, which it makes sense as well why we decided to pull off. And on top of that, you guys should be aware we are sitting at a very critical level, hence pending orders and things of that nature. And so where are we going to move now, right? And that's the big question. But one thing to take into consideration is that this and this, those are two separate trends, right? And so in reality, if you're going to be looking to take short-term sells on this, remember, you're just looking to run it back to the base of that initial ascending trend. Reason being is because the entirety of the bullish momentum is not done until you see clear cracks below that previous 92.50 handle. Once you do, you definitely have all right to run it back down to 90.50 handle, and that'll be your descending trend, right? But one thing to take into consideration once again is that this is the impulse that you're now stating is invalid, not this one just yet. And so once we start moving into the smaller time frames and you guys start taking a look at, okay, how am I going to start approaching this from a short-term and longer-term perspective? Right now, any sell to the downside's got to be warranted as short term, because that could be treated as relief, liquidation, blah, 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 for another continuation back to the tops, right? And so something that you have taken into consideration, you don't want to become range bound like we did back here and be stuck in that and not be aware of it. So if you guys are very curious on how potentially something like that could form there, take a look at this, right? So once it impulsed there and then initially made that false break, you do get that one traditional pullback right back to the lows. But then from there, it becomes a game of the ranges, and you have to be quite careful on that. So that's ideally what we're looking for, right? And then from there, we're going to see, is it going to become a range or not? And so looking at it, guys, be very careful on the two ways. Right now, you're going to have a clear shot back down to 92.50. But besides that, it's going to be a game of who's going to take over, right? And so let's take a look at this, guys, real quick. Just going to delete those two little trend lines there. Don't mind these, guys. It's nothing really important. And so let's take a look at what's going on here. As of right now, guys, we can see that structure was in a short-term ascending channel, but we did know that this was treated as relief or liquidation. Now let's talk about what was going on. We broke above, creating higher highs. Right away, we decided to break right back inside, creating a couple of things. False break being number one, potential head and shoulders pattern being number two, that 94.15 being the neckline number three. On top of that, guys, it's telling us that structure definitely has enough momentum now to start pushing to the downside, right? But one thing to take into consideration again is that this is a pretty strong impulsive movement. And so if we do not, in fact, continue to push down here, you could expect a pullback to here, which would create a short-term flag, and you could run it to the downside. That's a potential play that could happen. But since this is quite impulsive, and one thing that we do want to mark is those two initial trends that I was telling you, let's take a look, and from a bigger term perspective, let's break it down. This is one, and this was the impulse. Therefore, this is where the new trend started. So this is the second one here. Now we have an idea of, okay, where are we taking our targets to? Keep in consideration that 93.28 handle. That's the number that you want to be sitting in. Reason why I'm going into a 1 hour time frame, guys, is simply for one reason. This is a pretty impulsive movement to the downside, right? And so at some point this is going to pull back quite hard, and as if it does, right, you want to be able to execute that on a smaller time frame perspective. You probably won't get it on the 1 hour. And so what are we looking at as of right now? Well, notice this, guys. Once it broke that low, creating lower lows, that's when the momentum switched from this ascending to now descending, right? And so what is the behavior that you guys potentially might notice? My students should see this. It starts with an impulse. It does start with a pullback, and then you'll see another impulse. So you will see another pullback. So in reality, you guys should know that if that's how dollar is going to necessarily trade until it gets a bit lower, right, then every single time it flags out, you guys are ideally looking to get into that first momentum retest, right? Not necessarily the structural one. So looking at it from where dollar is going to move right now for the next 24 to 72 hours. If this pattern does impact complete and this starts to become your descending trend line, right, what you guys are going to be looking to do is the moment that sells out, you guys are going to be looking to run that straight back to the previous lows, right? And once we get to there, then it's going to be a game of, okay, what's going to happen in reference to that initial trend that we did create. So this is where the highs and the lows of that does sit. So now you guys have areas of target. Once this does flag out, you guys can start running it to the downside. That would be your first, but your guys' goal is to run it straight back down to there, simply because this can be treated as relief for correction for another continuation back to the upside, because we are taking in A and B as well. And now, if that doesn't happen and it continues to impulse, right, at some point you want to expect a bigger term correction for another downside play. But the next 24 to 72 hours, you guys are good to go to be looking for sells on all dollar pairs, which means that your US dollar is setting up for a beautiful long. Once again, very identical to what's going on with dollar index as of right now. And so as we look at it, critical area once again, right? A lot of people are saying, well, we should be looking for sells, right? Because simply for the fact that this trend broke out, it's time that we should come back all the way to this previous low. And I was arguing to them and say the one thing you have to factor in is that a trend is not a straight line shot, but a dictation of highs and lows. And so let's factor in a couple of things here real quick. Where's the first high and where's the last low and the last high of this current structure? You can see here that this is the last low and this is the last high. Once we broke that, where are we continuing next to? So we will come down to there. We break through that, then you know what, we are coming straight down to there, right? It's kind of like an elevator game, but more importantly, guys, you guys are just stressing it on how momentum works. Like just like we went into the dollar index, right? This was the initial momentum that caused that, but this is the one that's regarding the entirety of the structure. And so until you see that initial breakout on the weekly time frame, you are not poised for continuation back down. Rather, you should be looking for structure to start decelerating, potential reversal pattern to start lagging back to the upside. Now, EU gives us a much clearer perspective on what should go on, because look, there's a couple of different possibilities on how this is going to play out, okay? So what's first going to happen is this. We have that impulse. And so it's not to say that, you know what, dollar can't continue, euro can't continue downside, because it's very possible. But this is the impulse. Dependent on what happens here and how big of the initial impulse it makes will warrant what type of movement you guys are going to get. As of right now, all we can say is that structure should return back to this previous region to create a structural retest and potentially create a lower high with this in this region, right? And then from there, that will start another decline straight down. That is possible, right? But if it starts to create that reversal pattern, starts to decelerate, and makes a strong enough impulse to the upside, then one thing that you got to take into consideration is that if this starts to flag out like it did there, your goal is to buy that straight back to the tops and hope you can break out all the way above. Not saying that we hope when we're in our trades, but, you know, if you guys get that, you know you guys are going to move up, but, you know, hoping that you guys crack the tops now, right? Now, if it doesn't do that, then from there, you're just going to expect a structural retest back into here, and that should warrant back down. So it's going to be very important what happens in these next, 4 to 8 weeks, right? How do we develop in here? Because you can see, could it be a, structural retest / flag, creating this head and shoulders pattern, that being the neckline, that breaks, and that is your entire movement down? Is that possible? Sure, right? But at the same time, guys, you have to factor in what's going to happen here. How big of a relief are we going to get, right? And more importantly, how strong. And so one thing to factor in, guys, once again, is these levels are from the beginning of the week, so outdated. Just please take that into consideration. But just looking at it from a structural perspective, right? Let's take this away because that's a little messy. Okay, looks better. As of right now, we can see that EU is definitely pulling back off of that 115 handle, which is the previous monthly support, 115, 116. And so with that, if this does in fact warrant the false break, our goal is to tag the tops. That's where we're looking to go. And then from there, it's any man's game, right? Or any person's game for that matter. And simply for the fact that that's the initial impulse, that's the relief, this is the trend that you're basing it off of. And so if you get some type of impulse and some type of relief, your goal is to run that back to the tops. And then from there, it's going to be, okay, can we break out, pull back, and start rallying up? That's your ascending trend, right? Or if that doesn't happen, right, then it's okay. Does this treat it as relief for another downside play, right? Now, one thing that could happen as well is that typically when false breaks do happen, that's how initial head and shoulders pattern or inverted head and shoulders pattern happens. So if that does happen, could get a rally up to here, that being the previous right shoulder, one more flag, and breaking out, that being the neckline, that being the head, right? So that is possible as well. But let's talk about the next 24 to 72 hours and what could potentially happen. And so looking at it, like I said, we did break out. We are creating short-term higher highs, definitely validating that we could start rallying to the upside. Why am I saying short-term higher highs? There's your last high slash low, creating higher highs, and that was a previous high slash low. We are still even pulling off of that. So what could happen? Well, quite impulsive, and we never got a structural retest. I will not be surprised if that pulls back, rallies, and starts to pull all the way back to that weekly resistance. That is possible, right? Now, if it doesn't do that and it continues to go up, this will be warranted as a short-term and more of an aggressive approach because this is quite extended. At some point, you are going to expect that for that if it's going to happen. Remember, a trend moves in four ways, right? So you'll have a low, you'll have a high. 1, 2, you need a pullback, creating a higher low, and a break creating a higher high. That is your trend, right? And so the same concept with this. If we're going to break out, this is our low and this is our current high. We're going to either need, keeps going, you guys should understand now why I'm stating that's going to be warranted as higher risk, right, or more of an aggressive approach. But since it is impulsive, right, and we were looking at DXY on the 1 hour, we will look at the same on euro to US dollar. So as of right now, two ways, guys. We did have this initial impulse, small term flag, another impulse. You can see that the flag is breaking out as of right now. Some people honestly might take it off of something like this. If you guys do, that's not invalid, but you guys just know that the tops are not broken. Some people might simply want that previous level to break, a break, retest. You could go up. That is a potential trade as well. If we do break the current high as of right now, just know that if we do this, guys, and that does occur, you guys can start seeing the behavior will start to reverse at some point, and you guys are going to expect that for that, right? And that potentially could start to form your trend. Now, if it doesn't break these highs, right, and starts to form a deeper pullback, you guys are just waiting for when is that going to pull back, and it potentially could pull back within, that region right here, right? And so once it breaks out initially, you guys are golden to run that back up, right? Now, the only way it's going to become a sell, guys, is if and only if that starts to break out, plus, let's say, this previous low here, you could take an initial sell. If that breaks, followed by a pullback, you guys could take that back down to there. That's possible, but I wouldn't really take the sell till that crack, followed by a small continuation pattern and run that back to the lows kind of within here. And that will be a descending trend, and therefore this whole movement will be treated as relief or correction after that initial impulse was made to the downside. So that is a possibility that you guys have to factor in as of right now. But based on how we're looking at structure, guys, you should be long bias on this short term. Long term is still too indecisive to say, right? All we can say is that we should most likely target back that weekly resistance, and then from there, it's going to be interesting to see what happens from there. USD CAD, guys, I'm pretty sure most of you guys know how I feel about this pair. Give me 30 seconds, guys. Just going to take a sip of water. All right, guys. So if you guys follow me, if you guys work with me, you guys part of the training course, right? You guys know that this has been a pair that's been, at least to say, a little pain in my ass, excuse my language, guys, but it has been. And reason being is because we knew this entire time what CAD was meant to do. But the issue with CAD, guys, was that it's funky when you're dealing in such critical areas. And my students and I know, the team knows that 129 to 130 handle, that is the area that you do not want to fight with, right? That is something where you really want to stay below or above that area. Reason being, guys, is you can see in the past how hard the buyers fought for that region. This was owned by the buyers. Once we finally broke through, right now the sellers are saying it's our territory, it's time for us to take control. But you guys can see how very easy it is to get caught in the crosshairs in something like that, right? And so you have to be very, very careful. Even though I came out with the YouTube video saying, where's CAD going to go, blah, blah, blah. It's not that we're incorrect about our direction, and we're not confused on why that happened, because look, it happened in the past. Art of Technical Analysis states we are using past historical data to predict future potential movements. And so if that's the case, we understand why this happened due to the past. Is it wrong to say how we took the trade? No, because we did have validation about 3 weeks ago within this previous candle, once we broke out of there, that we should at least continue back to the lows, and we never got there. But we're not confused on this. And so with that, guys, if you guys are new to how CAD works, right, just look at its behavior real quick, very simplistic and easy. Starts with initial impulse, then a relief, followed by another impulse, and now we are in the same pattern. And so, like I said, guys, this is something really interesting. Either A, once this breaks out, it's going to come to here, and either it's going to continue straight to the downside, just like we had this initial impulse here, and that'll just create another one, or B, it'll decelerate, pull back one more time, and then drop for one last time. So that is a possibility as well. But as of right now, we completely understand why CAD is whipsawing up and down, and more importantly, why it is doing what it's doing. And so with that, guys, I just repeated myself. You guys can beat me up on that, but I just realized. And so with that, looking at it as of right now, where are we going with CAD? Well, like I said, guys, this is not something that you want to deal with. Once we got stopped out initially, or did we get stopped out? I don't remember if we closed at take profit one or not, or we closed at break even. Not sure, but I know that we didn't really make anything significant or lose anything significant on that last trade we took on CAD. So looking at it as of right now, same behavior. That is ideally the trend that you're looking to trade as of right now. And so once that does crack, plus this previous low, you guys are golden to run that straight to the downside, treating this all as relief after that initial impulse. And you guys are looking to take that straight back down to 126.15, potentially even to 125 if you can get the leg to the downside, simply for the fact that that ascending trend is what holding the whole movement, with that warranting as a false break. And so looking at it as of right now, what's going on in the daily time frame, guys? Well, notice this. Everyone knew that this was going to reverse, right? We should have all been very aware of that, right? At least my students know that. They knew that this wasn't a continuation pattern, but a reversal pattern after that. See, that's the continuation, an impulse again, and that becomes the reversal pattern, right? And so if any of you guys caught that initial trade off of the setup, shout out to you guys. We did state once we broke the lows there, that is your initiation to start looking for the sell. And so shout out to you guys if you guys got that trade. But this is honestly textbook, whoever got this. Impulse, reversal pattern, deceleration at the top, major term level. We received that impulse. We're going to look for the pullback. Wherever it pulls back to, we're going to look to sell that back to the downside. That is textbook on how we teach in the course. That is beautiful. Forever got that. That gets me hyped, guys, because I just love this game at the end of the day. And so, but that is just, it's awesome when you see certain things play out in the way that you want. So that was really beautiful. So where is CAD going to move now in the next coming hours? So why am I popping to a 1 just for you guys that are not aware, simply for the fact that this is quite impulsive. So whenever it does decide to break out again, I expect another impulse to the downside using its initial momentum. Very basic and simple, that creating my descending trend, right? Because that was where the last low was, hence that's where the trend starts. And so where should we go? Oh, no, where should we go? No, in reality, guys, we're looking to target back to the previous lows of the consolidation box, simply for the fact that, remember, it's not an entire sell until we do, in fact. So whenever this does break out, right, that is your target all the way to the downside, but you need that to break out for you to get that, right? That's what you need to happen. Simply because, guys, you can see, and I'll mark in a different color, that this area right here was heavily guarded. Don't come and tell me that you want to fight with fire over here. Like, you know what I mean? This is just like, you got McGregor here, you got Mayweather there. It's just like back and forth all day long. You know what I mean? And so that's not something that you guys should be interested in, right? Your interest should really be continuation patterns within here, short term, right? Because simply for the fact that you're still riding that. Once you see, this right here, that's your play, right? That's your golden ticket. And then from there, you guys should be able to see in a very simplistic way, that's your descending trend that will start to form, right? And so with that, with CAD, whenever you guys can sell that continuation pattern, take it to the downside. UJ, whoever has been following the webinar, shout out to you guys, because you guys should all know and be aware that that ascending trend was treated as correctional relief for further continuation to the downside. And that was something that we all knew, simply for the fact that let's review the structure real quick, okay? So what can we see? We saw the initial impulse, saw a pullback. Then we saw another impulse. We're counting this as one movement now, okay? So that's the impulse to the upside. We understood why everybody was saying, you know, let's start looking for the longs, right? And that's still going to come into place. We're just expecting one more, and then we're expecting the rally back to the upside. But the issue was, where did the impulse occur? There. Where was the pullback? Here. Where was the base? There. So what happened? This impulse now becomes invalid once we broke the lows here. And therefore, like we said, we're treating this as correctional relief for one more down. Then we're going to expect this to decelerate, right? And then from there, we're going to expect, that's a really bad drawing, but then we're going to expect some type of break back to the upside, warranting that initial impulse to come back into place, stating that this is all correctional relief. And so if you guys understand complex structures, you guys will understand that this is a short-term. Previously, guys, it was a short-term buy. You're treating that all as correction for a longer-term sell with even a longer-term buy. 3 different ways in one, right? So, and we were, here we go. Phase 1, we said this was correctional movement, right? Why are we saying that? 2 reasons. 1, we broke that kind of comes in. Let's just say we broke that. I was going to say level 1 and level 2, but let's just say here. We did, in fact, break here, back start of 2018. So my students know that this is all a structural retest, relief, liquidation, whatever, for another downside play, at least to these lows, and potentially to break them to tag that monthly support, right? And so that's why we are stating, be very careful when you're taking this bullish run, simply for the fact that that is treated as, you know, short term, right? Because you are still expecting that because of that, right? Very basic. You guys should be aware of that. And so looking at it on the smaller time frames, right? What's going on as of right now? Well, we can see, and this is what we love, right? There's your head and shoulders with the false breaks of that 110.909 area. And so with that, how are we taking it? Well, you guys should be aware that 2 trends, once again, first one creates that base. That's your second one, right? Once that broke, that was an easy flag, straight back to the lows, right? But now becomes anybody's game once again, because if that starts to take place, this could be treated as relief for another upside play, and that is a possibility, right? But at the same time, guys, if this does flag out and start to break down, yeah, that's your trade all the way, looking around that back to the monthly support. But let's take a look at it on the smaller time frames just to see what's going on. And so as we can see right here, guys, we can see that UJ right now is in somewhat of a short-term relief or liquidation stage. And so it does seem like there is a clear-cut possibility for another downside play if we do start to create short-term lower lows. Let's break it down. We do have an impulse. We do have a consolidated relief. We have another impulse, and we now have another consolidated relief. That's UJ's behavior right now. So with that, guys, if you guys look at how UJ breaks out, it will break its low. You will get a short-term opportunity on the 1 hour time frame to get an entry, and then you will get the drop. And so same thing here, guys. We are range bound right now. We're going to expect that small pullback, and we're going to expect the drop. That's going to be your trade straight to the downside. Now, like I said, guys, you want to be careful of that initial impulse up. And so with that, guys, if it doesn't happen, this is all treated as correctional relief once we create short-term higher highs. And then from there, we get a correct continuation pattern. Once we break out, etc., we are good to go. So those are your 2 trades. Otherwise, guys, you guys do not want to be trading in that, because that's going to be warranted as all consolidation. GBP, US dollar, critical. Once again, where are we moving? Where are we going? So not confused on what's going on, right? If you guys are familiar with pound economics, you do receive that initial impulse followed by relief, another impulse, another relief, right? And so we are in that liquidation stage, or we were, and now we are seeing continuations of that bear market, right? We did break out of this ascending trend, but the trend's not the thing that's important, guys. It's really this previous low that's important that broke. And so that is telling us that we should now continue to the downside. I mean, in reality, I would not be surprised if we just continue to drop, right? Not be surprised on that. But as you guys might or might not know, economies are not good when they continue to move, or currencies are not good for economies, or appreciation or depreciation of assets are not good for economies in continuous directions, as liquidation does need to occur. And so with that, guys, at some point, someone's got to liquidate on this entire movement. The question is just when, right? And so looking at it as of right now, let's break it down just from the daily. We do have this initial impulse followed by short-term relief, another impulse. Then we do create this a reversal pattern, or decelerated descending channel. Now, one thing to take into consideration was that even though that was a reversal pattern, can be warranted as consolidation. And so with that, once we did break out, this does start to form a new bearish descending trend. Hence, this becomes a bit more complex. Now, one thing to take into consideration is that this entirety of the movement is still signifying that we should reverse at some point. But it doesn't matter what it's signifying. You're just keeping that in the back of your head. Now, looking at it from the daily, couple different possibilities, which is why I said the complexity of it might be a bit difficult for some of you guys. You guys have to factor in that we do have this entire bearish movement, and let's break down channel by channel. But once we broke that, we did make another impulse. So I would not be surprised if we pull back. And you guys would say, is that the long? I would say no, because we could drop one more, right? If we made a strong enough impulse up, followed by a continuation pattern, that's your buyback to the upside, or at least back to this previous range, right? And so, looking at it as of right now, you're playing one, you got small back, that could be a structural retest, that could be treated as relief for another downside, or if you break out, you could go one more. Now, if it just continues to drop, right, just know those are higher risk exposed trades, and your ultimate goal is to get back to that monthly support. But looking at it as of right now, you can see that pound did have some difficulty when it was moving up, so I won't be surprised if it does have the same difficulty when moving down. So, I mean, it could simply just, be very, very slow, just like this was, and when it does get its bearish movements, it will make those strong impulses. So it will be a wait and see type of game, but I did not even go into the 4-hour time frame. That is really bad. And so let's see what happens on pound dollar. And so looking at it from the smaller time frame perspective, guys, what's going on? So like I said, two channels that you have, that initial one followed by this short-term reversal or slow decelerate channel, but same time was range bound. Once we broke the lows, new more extended descending channel behavior creates short-term flag, short-term relief, and things of that nature. And so what could potentially happen if you guys break out? You guys could look to run that back to the downside. Ultimate goal, though, is below the weekly support, simply for the fact that is a critical level. Pending orders will be sitting there, right? So if we do break out, you're looking for a small pullback, continuation pattern, run it straight back to the downside. That is your entry near there. Now, if it doesn't happen, guys, and this does pull back even more, you don't necessarily want to take that buy. You could, but that could treat it as correctional relief for another downside play. That could be your sell. Now, the only time I'd see a buy is if you make a strong impulse up, followed by a small pullback, and then from there, you could expect a rally back to the upside. From there, it's either treated as relief, or we start rallying and we start making a big enough impulse, or that starts breaking, we make a smaller one, right? Be careful, guys. You're dealing with some serious selling pressure here, and so if we don't break above these critical levels, right, this is kind of what you're working in as of right now, right? And so I hope that clears some clarity for you guys. Actually, the way my arrow shows you guys here, and like I said, I'll break it down better when we go to the last segment of it, is in reality this would be a short-term buy to here, and then from there you would need another break, pull back, and then from there you could target the weekly resistance. I didn't remove the disable annotations. I don't know why people do that. I don't get that. But anyways, let's keep going. So, okay. AUD USD. So once again, guys, very, very critical. What were we stating on the weekly time frame, right? Even though AUD economics are still poised for downside, right? We should still see, potential upside short term if we don't break these lows, right? Let's take a look real quick. That's the impulse there. That's the relief, right? Continuation down. We're just treating this as correction for another trade back to the downside, right? But keep in mind, guys, a trend is not a straight line shot, but it's, a consistence of highs and lows. And so what we were saying on AU was, even though it broke this ascending trend, right, that doesn't matter in the end of the day, because you have to factor in the lows, right? Did the lows break? And they didn't, right? And so what were we saying? Be careful. If it makes the impulse and it starts to decelerate, creating that reversal pattern, right, could expect one of these all the way back to the tops, tagging that again. Is that possible? Yes. Remember, you're just range bound, right? So still, set for downside. The question is, when are we going to get there? Why does it keep jumping? Sorry. AUD, and then the daily time frame. Two ways we could do it right now, guys. So still downside, and that's your descending channel. You have this initial impulse, therefore you're treating this as short-term correction. These are all going to be short-term trades because that could be another trade back to the downside unless we make a strong enough impulse above the weekly resistance, small type of pullback, and you could look to rally that back to the upside. Now, one thing to factor, and you guys will get a better look on the 4-hour time frame, is this. Even though that was a false break, let's look at this right here, okay? Why was it a false break and why didn't it matter? This broke out, sure. I'll give you guys that. So if you guys got that initial AU trade on the break of that lows, good for you guys. That was a quick short-term trade. But even though that trend broke, this low never broke near here of that initial impulse up. And so therefore, this is just treated as relief for continuations back up. And so looking at AU as of right now, two ways that we could see structure going. If it does make another impulse up above the monthly resistance, look for a short-term pullback and look to ride that back to the descending trend short term, because guys, in the end of the day, the entirety of this structure, and I know it's not clean on the daily, it looks clean because there's a false break, is treated as relief because of that initial impulse to the downside. And so simply, if this starts to decelerate and starts to make a strong enough impulse, you're looking to sell that all the way back to the downside. But if you can get a strong enough bullish push up, followed by a short-term continuation pattern, you could look to run it up. So it's really going to be critical on what do we do here, and what do we do? Can we crack that area hard enough? And if we do, can we break through that entire trend? Right, that's going to be very, very critical. Sells are not going to be warranted until you either start to break back below these lows. If that breaks out, right, because you do have a short-term sell there, but that's it. Unless this happens, that's your ultimate sell. And like I said, the sell could occur if this starts to push higher and then breaks out from a higher point. Last but not least, NZD USD on the monthly time frame. Once again, set for downside as of right now, but not really giving us any clear direction, because even though the ascending trend broke, or that ascending trend broke, whatever you guys want to say, this low never broken yet, right? And so until that low, in fact, does break, you guys are not going to see continuation to the downside. You need to see that followed by a short-term continuation pattern. You guys can look to run it down, and that would be your trade, right? So looking at as of right now, we are just simply range bound. And so what we are going to be looking to do is going to see, what is structure going to do right here? Same concept that I talked about on EU, right? Is it going to pull back, structurally retest, and start to tag once more the lows and potentially even go lower, right? Or is structure, in fact, going to make a strong enough impulse like it did here, right? And from there, just keep going up to tag the high. So once again, critical area, dependent on how big that initial impulse is going to warrant where you go, whether it's here or tag the tops once more. So be very careful on NZD USD from that perspective. Let's take a look at what happened in the past. Let's take a look at what's happening now. You will see, slow, decelerated bearish movements, creating that reversal pattern, that initial impulse that creates it, breaking those highs. That's when you start pulling the trigger. Same concept, right? Once we break, you pull the trigger and you go. So once again, guys, that's your reversal pattern. If we break out, small pullback, run that. Run it to the tops, right? Just be wary of that area, because that could be treated as relief for another downside play if we don't break above, okay? Now, looking at it from the 4-hour time frame, we know how critical this area is, so we're going to be quite careful on assessing it. And so looking at it, we do have that initial impulse down, right? We did have that reversal pattern. Now we are in a relief stage as of right now. And so looking at it, two ways. Either this impulse is up, small pullback, we go, right? Or this breaks out. Once that breaks out, small continuation, you guys can look to run it to the lows, but the safest place is below or above, right? One thing to factor in once again on NU is that it is basically a range-bound play. And so until we really either break the highs or the lows, you guys aren't really safe. I mean, it's just higher risk exposed trades and shorter term. This is really your ultimate goal. That's your one play, or above, pullback, and start to rally that back to the upside. And so, guys, that is the complete breakdown from a longer time frame and shorter time frame perspective on the dollar index pairs. And so what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to take a quick sip of water, and then from there I'm going to I'm going to go over the pairs one more time, breaking them down for the next 24 hours to give you guys an outlook on what could potentially happen. So. All right, so let's get right into it. So looking at EU, guys, for the next 24 to 72 hours, you guys do want to take into consideration that there is a couple of different ways this could play out, right? Simply for the fact that we are in critical areas right now. We can see at the previous, 115, 116 handle that has been a lot of buying pressure there, right? So it's all going to be depends on how that initial impulse does occur. If EU, in fact, could make a strong enough impulse to the upside, followed by some type of pullback, you could expect longs back to that previous 121, 122 handle. Now, one thing to take into consideration is that dependent on how this ascending channel plays out will warrant what type of movement it is, because this can be treated as just relief or liquidation for further continuation to the downside because of that initial impulse that was made. But if it does in fact make a strong enough impulse up, right, and does continue to flag out, right, your goal is to target the tops, right? But you do want to factor in, guys, one thing that head and shoulders pattern can in fact form, making this entire 115, 116 handle the base or the neckline. And once you crack that, that could be your entire big sell back to the downside. So be very careful on what happens within here within the next 24 to 72 hours, because that's going to be your ultimate dictation on how are you going to treat this in the short-term ascending trend, right? Treat it as aggressive, treat it as moderate. Be very careful on that. Looking at it from a 4-hour time frame as of right now, we can see that Euro-US dollar did in fact break out of the descending trend line and, more importantly, create short-term higher highs, breaking that previous high, creating higher highs. And so with that, guys, one thing to factor in is that this is the next previous high that was acting as a low back in the day. And so with that, what we want to see is two things. Either A, structure impulses to the upside, followed by a short-term pullback or liquidation. And from there, you're going to look to buy that all the way back to the tops. Please factor in that you are at a critical level here on the weekly resistance. And so in reality, you probably want a bigger impulse above the weekly resistance, a short-term pullback, and you guys can look to ride that up. You ideally want to be above the weekly resistance, but you guys can trade within here. Now, if that initial impulse does not occur, I would not be surprised if we pull back, create a structural retest, and break out and start rallying back to the weekly resistance. That is a possibility as well. The only way a sell opportunity would occur is if, in fact, this does break out strong enough with a sharp impulse, small pullback, and you guys can look to run that all the way back to the downside. But the real sell wouldn't be safe unless this first broke out with a strong enough impulse of pullback and you guys are looking to run it down to the weekly support. You guys don't want to be playing with anything below that. So the sells are quite critical because you are dealing with monthly and weekly. The buys do have some more possibilities. Once again, be careful because you guys want to see how are you guys going to treat that entire bullish movement, simply for the fact that you are expecting structure to come back to this previous low. And from there, it's going to be a dictation of if this does impulse up, it starts to flag out and starts to break out near there, are we going to treat this as relief liquidation for further continuation back to the downside, right? Or are we actually going to break out, small continuation, and start tagging one more time that weekly resistance? So that is something that you want to factor in. USD CAD on the daily time frame. Start with the weekly. Actually, we were stating once again that you were treating that entire bullish momentum as short term and as aggressive, simply for the fact that you guys can see that CAD's behavior starts as follows: with an impulse, a relief or liquidation, pullback, followed by another impulse, and now we are in that same phase. And so really two ways this is going to play out. Once this small term ascending trend breaks, we're either going to see a big enough impulse, and that's just going to drag all the way to the downside, just like we saw the initial push occur in May of 2017. Now, if that doesn't occur, right, we're going to expect structure to pull down, start to decelerate, pull back, create short-term relief, and then start to leg to the downside. We are expecting that at some point. But pulling it to the daily time frame, right, we can see here, guys, that USD CAD has in fact falsely broken those previous highs, right? That 129, 130 handle was not something that you guys were looking to fight with, simply for the fact that you can see in the past, like we were stating on the longer time frames, that that was acting as a very strong area for the buyers. And so with that, guys, you want to be very careful on acting in that area, simply for the fact that you can see how hard the buyers fought to win. And so once the sellers took off, right, they took control, they're saying now it's our territory, right? And so completely understandable why we're seeing a lot of whipsaw, or we're seeing a lot of false movements. And so as of right now, you guys want to be careful with any type of bullish movements, right? We are seeing these false breaks on that monthly resistance. It makes a lot of sense on why that's occurring. And so we are looking to just simply sell the rallies back to the base of the consolidation and nothing more, because you do want to factor in one thing. That is the initial impulse, right? And so this is kind of what CAD has been sitting in for quite some time now. And so what do we see? We do see first false break 1, and now we are going to count this as false break 2, right? Potentially even false break 3 if you want us to look at those. And so with that, how have they all played out? Well, they've made a strong enough impulse, right? they will make a small pullback and they will drop one more. We've made that initial impulse. Whenever this does break out, right, whether it comes to here and creates a structural retest and then starts to drop, right, it doesn't matter. That is your ultimate sell. So the moment that this flag breaks out, look to sell that to the base of the consolidation box, because from that could turn into short-term relief, right, for another leg back to the upside. The only way it becomes a definite sell is if and only if we do break that low, followed by short-term continuation pattern, and you run that back to the weekly support. But ideally, if your ultimate goal is to take that, right, and start running it to that weekly support, you got to take an entry within there, because then you've missed the entirety of the trade if you start getting in within there. Okay, so USD JPY, starting with the weekly time frame, we did state once again, guys, that initial bullish movement should be treated as relief as well as short term, simply for the fact that you have to look at the way that UJ broke. This was the initial impulse, this was the relief, saw another impulse, right? Therefore, this was treated as relief. One thing to take into consideration is that once that entire base was broken, therefore this does become invalid now. And so what we are looking for, guys, is we are stating that this is the initial impulse now, because this entire area did in fact get broken at the start of 2018. This was treated as relief, and we are expecting continuation all the way back down to that monthly support at 100. Then from there, guys, we will warrant that entire movement as short-term relief, right, because of that initial impulse to the upside. And so if you guys actually take a look at it, this would actually look like simply just a huge flag or liquidation for another continuation back to the upside. And you guys can see that even clear on the monthly time frame, guys, as this was the initial impulse that was stating. So if you guys are a bit confused on what that meant, guys, basically what I'm stating here is short term this was the short term bullish movement to the upside. Now we are seeing continuations to the downside. Our goal is to get to that 100 handle, and then from there we're going to look for the longer term buy. So short term, we're still looking, medium term, we're looking for sells. Long term, still looking for buys. And so looking at UJ on the smaller time frames, we can see that it did in fact falsely break that 110 handle, with that being the initial break, this being the false break. And so with that, we can see that the behavior formed with an impulse followed by a pullback and another drop to the base of the consolidation. Same thing like I was saying with CAD, I'm saying with UJ. This is setting up as a beautiful sell setup in the moment that this flag does in fact break, plus create short-term lower lows. From there, you're looking to sell that all the way back down to that daily support around 106.70, and that's going to be your sell. The only way it would become a buy, guys, is if and only if we did in fact create higher highs by breaking above that 109.06 with a strong enough impulse followed by a short-term continuation pattern, and you can look around that all the way back to the upside. That might create an inverted head and shoulders for you, and from that 109.8 handle being your neckline. One thing to take into consideration is that until we do break below or above the consolidation box, once again, guys, it is going to be any man's game, or any person's game for that matter. And so you really do want to be careful on what you guys end up doing when trading within here. Safest trades are going to be below the consolidation, right, once that breaks out, or above the previous high, small pullback, and try to run it back to the tops and potentially even back to the upside. And so that is US dollar. Looking at GU on the daily time frame, right, we aren't surprised on why GU is breaking to the downside so hard, right? We can see that its entire nature. It will start with that initial impulse to the downside, followed by a huge and long time of liquidation and profit taking, followed by another impulse. And so all we're in right now is just another relief stage for another continuation down. So I wouldn't be surprised, like I was stating on the webinar, if this just continues to drop all the way back to the downside. That is a possibility. But one thing to take into consideration is that this structure does have to liquidate and does have to start to pull back at some point, as this cannot continue to keep pushing to the downside. And so one thing we do want to take into consideration, guys, is if you guys look left, you guys can see that there was a very, very strong area of support / resistance that was being held by both the buyers and the sellers. So I wouldn't be surprised if this starts to decelerate, makes a strong enough impulse, small pullback, and starts to look to rally to that previous zone that it did in fact break. One thing to take into consideration is that if this does happen, that's going to be treated as relief, or it's going to be treated as a short-term correction, simply for the fact that you are still stating that the initial impulse is still to the downside. And if that does start to decelerate, you're going to look for that impulse, small-term pullback, and that's going to be a rally all the way back to the downside, forming that as the descending trend line that will start that entire bearish momentum, right? So once again, just like we were talking about before on AU and things like that, and on EU, it's all going to be dependent on what happens within this region. But looking at it from a 4-hour perspective as of right now, we can see that we are in a bit of a complex structure for two reasons. After we did make that initial impulse right here, right? We did in fact form this reversal pattern, but more importantly, it was range bound. And so once we in fact broke the lows of the range, right, definitely told us that momentum is going to continue to the downside. Therefore, this reversal pattern now becomes invalidated, and we're just going to state here that, you know what, it is simply a ranging game after it does break out. And so looking at it as of right now, we can see that structure did in fact break the lows, making this more of an impulsive channel. One thing to note about this channel is that its behavior starts with an impulse followed by a pullback, another impulse, pullback, etc. Right? And so, what could potentially happen on pound dollar? Well, one thing to take into consideration is that the safest plays are going to be first from an impulse below the weekly support, followed by a small term continuation pattern, structurally retesting that previous low. And if that breaks, that's going to be your trade all the way back to the downside. Now, if that doesn't happen, what could happen is this could start to create a double bottom, rally, short-term pullback, and from there, rally back to that descending trend line, right? It's not a big buy, guys, until you guys are in fact cracking that previous region. For you guys to see a big buy, you have to see a strong enough impulse up, followed by some type of pullback, and that would be a rally back up. So if that sell doesn't happen, guys, you're looking to take the buys above here short term. Small continuation pattern, run that to the descending trend. Then be careful, because this ascending channel can be treated as relief for another downside play, or if it does impulse to the upside hard enough, followed by a short-term continuation, you guys can look to run that to the weekly resistance. And so that would be pound dollar. Looking at AUD USD as of right now, guys, once again, we were stating on the weekly time frames that you should be very careful about about that trend. Remember, trends are not straight line shots, but consistence of highs and lows. Even though that ascending trend broke, right, that weekly support never broke, sitting right here. And we can see that, you know what, structure has started to decelerate and create some of the same and similar behavior that has formed that initial impulse. And so we won't be surprised if that does in fact occur. So pulling it to the daily time frame as of right now, guys, looking at what has happened in the past in this area, we can see that structure will make strong enough impulses, but at some point start to decelerate, impulse, small continuation, and rally up, just like EU and all these other pairs, right? Even though this has impulsed, right, notice what it starts to do. It's created that reversal pattern, right? And so with that, guys, if this can make a strong enough impulse up, followed by small term continuation, I have no problem seeing that rally all the way back to the top. So be very careful on what happens within here. Do not be surprised if you see a lot of whipsaw and a lot of head fakes. Let me take that out real quick, guys. And so looking at what's going on with AU as of right now, if structure can make a strong enough impulse up, small pullbacks to those previous highs, you could take this as a short-term trade. Remember, you're going to be treating this movement as relief, right, because of that initial drop. Now, one thing to factor in, guys, is that you do have this entirety of this ascending channel. Apologies about that initial one. This is ideally the relief that you're looking at, but treating that entire bullish momentum is still short-term or relief. Now, the bears would only occur as if you can make a strong enough impulse down below the previous lows that have failed to break, followed by a short-term continuation pattern, and you're looking to run it down. Please take into consideration that this is a range-bound pair, and so you're really just looking to play the lows or the highs at the range. Now, one thing to state is that there is more upside to downside, because we are now falsely breaking that weekly support as well as that monthly resistance. And so with that, guys, we could potentially expect a strong enough impulse to the upside, followed by some type of pullback, and then from there expect that big rally all the way back to the top. So be very careful in this area. Last but not least, NZD USD. Looking at it from the daily time frame, same thing like AUD USD. You do have that initial impulse to the downside. You do see that reversal pattern, impulse, another reversal pattern. Dependence on how big of that initial sharp movement it makes will really warrant on how big of a push we're going to get to the upside. If you guys do get that initial impulse up, small continuation pattern, look to run that back to this previous low that was broken. One thing to factor in is that if this does happen, guys, right, you do want to state that this can be treated as relief for another downside play if you do start to reject and decelerate near there. But if we do make a strong enough impulse up and we keep going, you guys could certainly target the tops. Pulling it to a 4-hour time frame as of right now, guys, you can see that NZD USD is simply just range bound, breaking above and below the previous lows, hence falsely breaking, but you can see that that is the range that it is in. And so there really are two possibilities: strong enough impulse up, small pullback, ride that straight to the weekly resistance, or B, this simply breaks out, you get a strong enough impulse, small pullback, you guys are still trading in the range, and you guys can look to run that all the way back to the downside. In reality, you are going to be dealing with some serious firepower there, and so probably the safest play for the sells is below the lows, pullback, and you guys can look to run that down to the monthly support. Failure to do so will just warrant consolidation within this range, and you guys are not something that that's not something that you guys should be interested in. And so with that, guys, that is the breakdown of all the dollar index pairs for the next 24 to 72 hours. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And so with that, guys, now we're going to be going into the questions and answers about anything that you guys have pertaining to the webinar or anything that I was going over. I'm going to do the question and answer for the next 5-10 minutes, and then from there I am going to have to run. Unfortunately, I am on a time constraint. So I'm going to go through the chat room after I get a sip of water, guys, and then from there I'll take any questions that you guys may have. Oh, that was a lot, guys. You guys don't, I guess you guys don't, I don't know if you guys realize, but like it takes a toll on your body when you guys are like really talking or going at something for a while. I feel like my body's like, it's like beat, but it's all good, no worries. So anyways, let's take a look at some of the questions. Oscar asked one question, Albert, have you ever thought about adding daily pivot points to your strategy? Not necessarily, because sorry guys, pivot points can, pivot points ideally are just giving you price targets, right? Areas where you could bring them to. It's the same thing as using fibs or things of that nature. Not directly the same, but the concept, right? And so it wasn't something that I was so interested in, but I have looked at them. I do find them interesting. It's just not something that I like to use. What about the shit with Italy? What Italy stuff are you talking about? And then Chris, what do you need, legend? If he's still here. Market was acting strange this week. I mean, what in particular was acting strange? Like I know a lot of the guys that I talked to this week. A lot of the students, they killed it this week. I don't know what. Thought the markets were simple. I just missed almost everything. Like you guys can see here. Like I sent these setups out, and I didn't expect this. I sent these setups out on Sunday or Monday, and within 12 hours, every single one went exactly to where we. Whoops, that's not it. Where it went to every single one that we wanted to go to, and I missed those. And so if you didn't get those trades in the beginning of the week, you probably missed the majority of them. But yeah, I mean everything was clean cut. I mean everything was called. So I'm interested to see what was helping, but. You need a gold outlook. All right. Gold is plain and simple. Do I have any of my students in here? I see Theo. Who else I got in here? I want someone to break this down for me. Theo, are you there? You want to break it down for me real quick? Or Steven, you want to break it down? Who wants to break it down? One of my students want to break it down? Let's do it, Alex. You want to break it down for me real quick? Alex, I muted your mic, legend.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry?
All right, break it down for us, Alex. Break it down for everyone that's watching. What happened here initially?
A big impulse.
Then, from there, what were we treating all of this as?
A correction.
Right, for continuation back up, right?
Yeah.
Then what happened? What did we break?
We break down, so it was a consolidation.
So, but we broke, more importantly, what of the structure?
At the bottom of the structure.
Right, the lows, right?
Yeah.
So what did this create? What does that create?
A lower low.
And therefore, this impulse now becomes?
Invalid, and now we
right,
change,
and from there, so tell me the behavior now from the course. That's the impulse. What's this?
The correction.
Right, for another continuation.
Yes, so we have
so then what's this?
But it's the correction and the retest of the last low.
And did you watch the two types of retest, legend?
No, I didn't watch. No, I took like 2 weeks.
Who knows? Okay, let's see if I got any of my other students in here. Who knows what type of retest this is? Anybody know? It's just Alex, go watch the video. But that's a structural retest, legend. And so, but that's right, Theo. Theo knows. That's what I'm talking about, legend. So, but where are we expecting this most likely to go to then? Alex, where are we thinking this is going to go?
I think it's going to go down for more. Yeah.
Right. We're looking to tag the lows here, right?
Yes.
And so this is a pretty basic behavior, right? Impulse pullback, right?
Yes. But I have a question. Do you think it's possible that the last, like we are in a pullback right now, but is it possible that switch for like a upside impulse.
It's tough. So real quick, mark me the lows and the highs. So let's break it down. Once we did this, high, low, right?
Yeah.
So here's the high and here's the low, right?
Okay, perfect. Yes.
But where's the last low here, right?
Yes.
So tell me what we need to do for me to say that we're going to switch momentum. First and foremost, we need to see what?
A break of the last low.
Right, a false break, right? And more importantly, where's the last high? Kind of right within here, right?
Yes.
So what do you want to see? A false break, then a higher high, right?
Okay, yes, perfect.
With an impulse, right?
Yes.
Then what are we going to expect?
After another pullback down.
Right, and why are we going to expect that? What are people doing?
Here we supposed to entry in the trade.
Right, but people are doing this because they are taking
Oh,
profit,
they are
right?
taking profit. Yes.
Right, and then from there, we'll expect that to break out, small pullback, and we go, right?
Yes.
Damn, we got the world's greatest trading team. That's what I'm talking about. Easy, like clockwork. That's what I'm talking about. You see that? That's what I'm talking about. See, that's why I love working with you guys in the end of the day. It's because, like, I know you guys work your ass off, and so when I see you guys on the webinar and so forth, I know you guys are going to come here and just kill it. So, well done, boss. Well done, Alex. You just broke that down just to a T. Well done, boss.
Yes, thank you.
Well done. Well done. All right.
I have a question for you.
I have an answer.
Nice. I was asking myself, like, if you miss it, like, I don't know, you're on gold. If you miss your trade, like you want to take a short on the last pullback, on the last correction, but you miss it, do you wait another correction to take a sell, or
Yeah,
you
that's a
wait
really
a
good
complete
trade.
reversed?
That's a really good example. You're saying if you miss this, right?
Yes,
Well, you tell me, what are people going to do at some point on this?
they will take profit.
Right. And more importantly, notice the behavior, reversal or continuation. The pattern.
The pattern, it's a reversal pattern.
Right. And then notice what it turns into now. Now that turns into a what?
The uptrend.
But it turns into a continuation, right? Because now this is,
Yeah.
right? And so if you miss it, yeah, ideally you're always waiting for the pullback because at some point someone is going to liquidate, right? And
Yes.
so the one thing is, look, Alex, you can take this, right? But what am I going to say about it? It's a higher risk exposed trade. Tell me why I'm going to say that.
Because we had two more impulse before.
Right. And so, if the impulse is there, you can enter, but you just need to say, okay, if the trade starts to go against me, I understand why.
Yes, okay, perfect.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Yes, thanks a lot.
Always, Alex, always live trading. I'm going to send email out. It's probably going to be on Friday, boss, okay?
Okay, perfect, yeah.
All right, boss. I'll see you then.
Yes, see you.
All right. Let's see. All right, what else we got? What are questions? Jose, so what about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle wedding? See, could you imagine? Yeah, that'd be funny. Mark was acting. I did the what up with Euro. Went over Euro. I'm going to upload that just to save time so I can get all the questions, but they'll be uploaded if you want to go back into it. Someone said, I have a problem with my entries after drawing in the ascending or descending trend line, and when the price breaks, I don't know if I should enter or really validate it. It's time to enter. Please show me an example. One thing is, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I'm sorry on that end, my friend, but is the entry, it's not just a one set way. And the reason being, and it's tough for me just to come and just be like, this is how you would go about entering. Reason being is for the sole factor that the environment changes so much in the market that, you might have a momentum retest, a structural retest. You might entering off of an impulse, a higher risk exposed trade, right? There's so many factors that go in. And so I'm sorry that I can't give you a direct way on exactly how to enter, because there are a bunch of different things that go into it. And this is not me like just trying to promote my course. I'm just stating, like, if you are having issues with entries and stuff like that, I know that if you're interested in taking the course, that should at least fix everything. If not, you got live training to ask me as well. And so, but yeah, it's really tough, Legend, if you can understand where I'm coming from, to give a correct way. I mean, in a very simplistic way, even though you're breaking out, a breakout's a mere indication and you still need confirmation. So you are in the course. Okay, so then what is the biggest? So, okay, sorry about that, boss. I just didn't know. So do you have a mic by chance? Or do you want to share your screen real quick, boss? The only reason why it's good that you're in the course, because now then I can kind of start laying out terms and stuff like that, and it'll be easier for me to communicate. That was the only reason why I was saying, because if you didn't take the course right and I start going into all these types of concepts, I didn't want you to be confused in any way. And so, do you have a mic by chance, Legend, that you can unmute your mic, or tell you that we can go into detail? I don't have a mic, but I've been looking for a video that focuses on that. Did you go to the entries and exits section? Like, for example, have you went through the whole course, Legend? Just out of curiosity. And if he said not yet on the types of impulses at the moment. And so, okay, this is what I suggest, Legend. Send me just so, because I'll send you voice messages back, and I'll send you some chart setups as well. And we also have live training. But what we could do, Legend, is send me a message on Telegram at thatfxtrader. I'll type the username in, so if you have it, and send me some charts on how you're entering and stuff like that. And then from there, I'll give you feedback and everything like that. How does that sound, boss? And we'll make sure that we fix everything. And we can just convey back and forth to make sure everything's 100% ready to go. Does that sound good? All right, perfect, boss, perfect. Because the one thing is I can go into more detail and we can talk more on that. And then also you have the live training as well. We will fix you, my friend. I promise you, you have no confusion whatsoever. We will get you there. And so Theo asked, what's spot rate IDX? Oh, this is just meant to say index, Theo. By the way, you guys might not know, but Theo Summers been with me for like 6 months, and one hell of a trader, just one hell of a trader, amazing trader. So he's awesome. He kicks ass. Nassim asked, oh, okay, yeah, Nassim, I'll get back to you after the webinar is over. So do you use different fib retracement on different time charts? So yeah, good question. You can use fibs on 2 different ways, right? We can use them on smaller time frame and bigger. For example, Nassim, like the way we teach in the course is we do use 2 fibs, like extensions and retracements, but on top of that, we can use smaller time frames. So let's say, for example, you know, that broke out, that low, you're trying to measure the whole movement down, right? So let's say we just threw some retracements on this from the high to the low near here, right? Okay. Now, on top of that, that'd be my daily fibs, right, for the entirety of this ascending to this descending. But if I want to throw smaller time frame fibs, I certainly can as well, because check this out. We can see here that we do have this ascending trend, right? And Legend, apologies, I don't know how to say his name, but the guy that was asking about the entries, he has a good point as well. So just so for learning purposes, just simplistic manner. So you can see here, I just threw fibs on the smaller and the longer time frames. And so Nassim, tell me, ideally, if I want to see continuation to the downside, what fib or level or whatever represents that last low, that would tell me I should start looking for sells. Right, 0.382, right? So if we break out, and here you go, Q-Go-C, sorry, I just don't know how to pronounce the name, right? The break is a mere indication. We're looking for a pullback or retest. We good to go. We're pulling the trigger back to the lows, right? Here's a 1, here's a 2, and that's your 3, right? And that would be your trade. Does that make sense, Sim? So yeah, you can use them. Q means chief, okay. Did that make sense though, Kigosi? Sorry if I'm saying it wrong, but did that make sense how we were looking for that? Because this is the impulse, this is the relief, right? And so if this breaks, that creates short-term lower lows, right? Warranting that momentum should continue to the downside. We're looking for a retest of some sort to confirm to us, and we're expecting continuation back to the downside. Stops would be above previous highs, plus some breathing room, and then from there, you're giving it a shot. That makes sense? Not sure. It doesn't need to touch 0.382 and bounce back. Well, you tell me, Steven. What's the quote I tell you? Steven, you got a mic here real quick or no? So, Steven, check this out, brother. What's the quote I tell you to live by? All good. What's the quote I tell you to live by? Let price prove to you it's going to move in the direction that you want, right? Okay. So you said doesn't need to touch the 382 and bounce back. What do you think I want? What do you think will prove to you? It's going to scream to you that it's going to push through in the direction that you want. What do you think it has to do? Touch the 382 or do what? Not retrace, but come on, give me the word. Give me the word. What type of trade? What do we want to see? It's got Walter White. What's the first? Anybody know? No? Kind of give. He knows. Boom. Right. There we go. We got to break through that whole thing, right? You guys got to let price prove to you, yeah, that's broken. Lower lows are made, right? Now let's rally, right? Let's start to create that descending channel. And so, yeah. But, legends, I unfortunately have to run off now. But first and foremost, just want to thank every single person that came out today. The session was absolutely amazing. You guys were awesome. The questions were really, really good. And so, Chief Kiosi, but Chief Legend, we're going to take care of everything. Send me a message on Telegram. We get you straight, Legend. No worries. Nassim, I'll get back to you, boss. And then, yeah, I'll check it once we get off. With that, guys, I just want to say once again, thank you so much for all coming out. You guys have been absolutely incredible. And so I'm going to get back to every single person on Telegram tonight. And then besides that, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Be very smart towards the end of the week. It is NFP week. Highly suggest you guys get a bag of popcorn. You guys watch that and just have a fun time, right? And then besides that, guys, I will see you all next week. If you guys need anything, by all means, you guys can reach me on Instagram, Telegram, wherever you guys found this Zoom link is probably the best place to reach me. But besides that, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week, and I look forward to seeing you guys all soon. Speak to you guys later.